to put in oil. But anyway, that was the goal with the recipes. Look them over. The recipes are just hopefully yummy ways to get healthy fat into the diet. So if you did not receive any of those handouts, contact Lynette or Colleen and they will set you up. So let's just, before we dive into fat, let's put fat into perspective. So in terms of overall nutrition, what do we need? What do we get from our food, from our daily diet, right? Well, we have to take in macronutrients and we have to take in micronutrients. And macronutrients are going to be carbohydrates, starches, protein, and fat. And I kind of put a little, highlighted bold fat, because if you think about it, this is one of our major macronutrients. And so if you think about the logic behind a non-fat or a low-fat diet, you start as thinking, what's the deal with that? If it's a major macronutrient, we actually need fat. But what kind of fats and how much fat? And I also put in water, because the macronutrients are, what do we take in large amounts, gram amounts or large amounts? So we should be drinking 2 liters or 2 quarts of water. It helps us utilize carbs, protein, and fat. Dehydration is a huge stress. And it's like, shame on us if we're dehydrated, because it's under our control. So now it's cold. So I've got some ginger tea on the stove. I boiled a gallon of water, 1/4 cup of chopped up ginger, peeled a little bit. I didn't go crazy trying to peel it all. And then I'll add a little cinnamon, let it simmer, and then I'll sip on that. That's kind of what I'm feeling like today. On a warmer day, I might feel like just having some ice cream tea. And so keeping yourself hydrated is critical. And then fiber. If you're having a plant-based diet, you're getting in a lot of fiber. And those are the things we take in huge amounts, right? Then there's the micronutrients. We take them in smaller amounts, like milligram or microgram amounts, as opposed to, say, gram amounts for macronutrients. This is our vitamins, this is our minerals, and our thousands and thousands of plant nutrients called phytonutrients. And these are the guys that are the real cancer fighters, or these are the guys that are the cofactors. Vitamin B6, for example, does conversion factors, zinc. These are these, you can think of them as being like the catalyst behind using our macronutrients and also just keeping us healthy. And so wanted to show that that's where our fat comes in. It's a macronutrient, but we need micronutrients in order to utilize our macronutrients. So taking in our animal foods and our vegetables, with our vegetables, is going to help us provide, taking the magnesium and taking the vitamins and minerals that help us utilize our macronutrients, especially our fat. So listen, so what is a healthy meal? Just to kind of give an overall. You're going to build a healthy meal with some carbs, which are usually starches. Veggies are carbs. Veggies are non-starchy or starchy. Whole grains, right? Bread's not entirely a whole grain, but if we're having it with some protein and some veggies, we're good. Some beans and some fruit, okay? Protein, building and repair. This is really critical during cancer, especially during recovery from chemo and during chemo and radiation and even some immunotherapies, because some of our rapidly growing cells, our GI lining, our bones, hair follicles, those are taking a hit along with cancer cells. So your normal cells can repair, but in order to repair, they need nutrition. So cancer treatment and post-treatment is a time of heightened nutrition. We want to make sure we're getting our carbs for our energy and cofactors, and our protein to build and repair. And we get this from our animal foods, fish, nut seeds, beans, legumes, whole grains, and even mushrooms, and even veggies provide some protein. And then fat, our star, what we're going to be talking about today. Fat is a source of energy, right? You can think of carbs as quick energy, like kindling in a fire. You can think of fat as like that slow burning log in the fire. And you might have heard of the ketogenic diet, where we kind of really cut carbs back drastically and we just sort of focus on fats. It's not a diet that's for everybody, But the idea is that the body will use fats for energy. But even if you're not ketogenic diet, you're sometimes using fat for energy. It's incredibly important for brain health. That's why non-fat diets, we just don't feel very good. And it's really important for hormone balance because fat is structurally what is the building block that we build hormones from, or estrogen or progesterone. This is why as people get older and their estrogens go down or testosterone goes down, naturally your cholesterol goes up because cholesterol is we really need a kind of adjusted normal values for cholesterol. It's normal for older people to have slightly higher cholesterol because they're trying to build more estrogen in other ways. So where do we get our fat? Avocados, plant fats, olives, nuts, seeds, our oils. Think of it as oiling the machine, right? Butter, and then ghee, for those not familiar. Ghee is clarified butter. It's butter that has all the dairy, all the milk solids have been removed. It's very popular in Indian cooking, very, very nutritive. It lasts forever. So that's an important fat. We use it kind of like butter. And then organic animal foods and fish. So that's sort of a healthy meal. These are our macronutrients. And then, so putting it in a different way, if we're building a meal, what does our plate look like? Well, veggies, 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 veggies. A plant-based diet is going to be more of a health-promoting diet. So what is a plant-focused diet? Means mostly plants. You can have animal foods, but it's super high quality in smaller amounts. I call it plant-focused as opposed to being plant-based, which is vegan. So in general, and of course, all of these are in general. If you're not feeling very well, and you have some symptoms of GI appetite loss or nausea, then all this, we're going to do the best we can. Maybe having a couple of sips of soup or toast and peanut butter, that might be what you can do. And that's totally okay. So this is like in general, you do the best that you can always. So a healthy meal is going to be some veggies, non-starchy veggies. Let's think of our broccolis, our green beans, our salad greens, our lettuces, our endive. About 50% of the plate, or maybe we'll also have a salad. So for example, I might have cooked broccoli and cauliflower, and then I also have a salad on the side. So I'm saying, the bulk of what I'm eating is colorful veggies. It's really a healthy meal. It gives us lots of vitamins and minerals and plant nutrients. We're going to have some starch because we need that energy and we need the B vitamins and we need food for good bacteria in the gut. They like starch, right? This is where ketogenic diet is problematic for some people because if you cut off all starches, we're not feeding our good bacteria that boosts our immune system. So about 25%. So this is going to vary depending on your starch tolerance and your carb tolerance. So a potato, some cooked quinoa, some wild rice, some oats or some whole grain bread, even mushrooms give us some starch. And then typically 25% of the plate will be protein. I think of it like the size of the palm of your hand, but maybe you're doing a stir fry and kind of all together, that's what you're going to have. And these are organic animal foods and our fish, our beans, our mushrooms. How much is on the plate will depend on the nutrient density. So this is kind of like ballpark. Some healthy fat. Here's where our fat comes in. If every meal has a little bit of healthy fat, it's going to help us absorb fat soluble vitamins. Really, really important. For example, calcium. So important for bones. Do you know you need calcium? You need fat to absorb the calcium. This is why non-fat milk is just not a health promoting food at all. A little bit of fat in 2% of whole milk is going to help you absorb more calcium from any dairy products. And of course, healthy fat can come from our plants. Our olive oil is one of my favorites. So I just drizzle some olive oil on some butternut ginger soup that I made. And that little bit of fat from my drizzle of olive oil allowed me to absorb my vitamin A and my beta carotene, right? So another thing is when people make smoothies, I'm having a green smoothie, I'm putting a whole bunch of veggies. What do you think about that? I said, that's really good, but add some fat. Add some nuts, or add a little nut butter, add a little avocado, add a little olive oil. Why do I have to add fat to that? And because the fat's going to help you absorb those really important fat soluble vitamins, vitamin A, D, E, K, beta carotene, right? So remember, fat is really important part of the diet. Okay, let's go on. What do we got? So a healthy meal. Also, we're going to have fruit on or in between meals because fruit is just the bomb in terms of providing cancer-fighting nutrients. I'm enjoying pomegranates and persimmons right now, as I hope you are. We're so lucky to be in California and to have these gifts from the planet. Pomegranate went in my oatmeal this morning. I just buy all these pomegranates, cut it up. It's kind of messy, be careful. And then I keep my pomegranate seeds. One pomegranate will pretty much last me a week or two. I put it in my granola, oatmeal, or a salad. It just looks so beautiful as well. One of the top cancer-fighting foods, by the way, pomegranate. And you call pomegranate seeds areoles. They have a special name. And persimmons, just delightful right now. I got a bunch of persimmons. I sliced them so you can see a beautiful star. And I'm dehydrating them and giving them as in jars as little holiday gifts, and they're delicious. Herbs and spices, really important. And of course, having some water, herb tea, and broth. Cultured foods with your meal. Yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi. There are other cultured foods really important for digestion and to provide probiotic bacteria. And then booster foods such as apple cider vinegar, a tablespoon in a cup of water will help digestion. Ground flaxseed, I put it in oatmeal, or I put it in granola, or I put it in a smoothie. And then sea veggies, tremendous source of minerals. Spirulina is a water veggie that's common in green powders. It's extra. I mean, you could just use regular vegetable greens, but some people like spirulina as well as our booster foods. So making a healthy meal, some starch, some protein, some fat. So having a little bit of fat. So having a fat-free meal just isn't complete. So a soup. So I gave you a recipe for butternut squash ginger soup. Right, it's got some healthy fat in there. You can drizzle it with olive oil. I'll put a little bit of creme fraiche. I'll put a little bit of cashew cream, chopped pumpkin seeds on the top. Stews. I gave you a recipe for a simmered beef or lamb stew. I like to use a slow cooker for this, but this is the time of year when it's wonderful. And so we'll talk a little bit more. Well, what about red meat? I thought I'm not supposed to have red meat when you're managing cancer. Small amounts of high quality, such as 100% grass-fed, is just fine for most people. And is actually very blood building if you're trying to build blood counts. And then it's also salads. I gave you a recipe for a sardine salad. I know that sounds a little weird, but think of tuna fish salad, and just substitute sardines, canned sardines for tuna. It's the bomb. And I put it on sliced apples, which are also in season, and you mix a lovely hors d'oeuvre and delicious crunchy apple and sardine salad. Very important for bone health and very important as a source of healthy fat, healthy omega-3s. And then there are different ways of getting fat into the diet. We can talk about them. Keep ingredients on hand and try to make extra. If you make a soup, like I made a butternut squash ginger soup and I froze it. And so I can enjoy it. So I'm putting the work in, I'll make extra and then I'll have it for when I need it. Typically 3 days in the refrigerator, 6 months in the freezer. So healthy meal recipe hacks. So you said, I'm just not feeling so good and I'm going through treatment. I don't have a lot of help. My appetite's just not so great. And I often hear people start feeling, oh my gosh, I'm not able to have my kale salad and my broccoli, and oh, I'm not fighting cancer so well. And they start getting all stressed about it. I said, whoa, hold on. This is where we do the best that we can. You're not feeling well. Keep it super simple, right? You can open up a can of Amy's soup or some other good quality soup. Have a toasted crackers, a little bit of butter. So that little bit of butter is going to satiate you, make you feel full, nice that palatability, and also give you the chance to absorb your fat soluble vitamins. Scrambled eggs. Scrambled eggs is one of my staples. That's what we had today for lunch because we got a new baby in the house and we're all like not sleeping really well. And so my son-in-law says, "Would you like a scrambled egg?" Yeah. It's like, oh my God, it's 12 o'clock. I didn't have lunch yet. Quickie scrambled eggs. Hey, got extra time? Put some spinach in it. Put some mushrooms in it. Otherwise, so I'm just saying that give yourself a break. If you're saying, I can't always be making butternut squash ginger soup. I can't always be making egg muffins. And I'm saying that's okay. Keep it super easy as well. Even looking at like frozen meals. That's one thing. If you go into stores like Whole Foods now, I'm really blown away by all of the convenience foods and how the quality has improved tremendously. People are just busy, and people aren't even going out as much. So they want to go to the store and stock up. So there's quite a bit of frozen entrees, dehydrated entrees. So what are some guidelines? So if you're trying to find if something's good, well, lower sodium, because some of them can be very high sodium. You really want to get in about 10 to 15 grams of protein per serving and about 4 grams of fiber. So if you don't have that, it may not be that nutritious. Avoid the real fried cream cheesy sauces. And then if it's got animal foods in it, I like it to be organic, or then maybe I'll get like a bean entree if I can't be rest assured that the animal product is hormone free. And then there are meal delivery services such as Green Chef, which has organic meats. And it's okay to do those too. I know they're a bit expensive, but it all comes under doing the best that you can. So what if you don't feel like eating? Keep it simple. Try for 3 meals a day. So even if it's just a few bites, get in a little bit of fat. So how about a banana and some peanut butter? How about crackers and hummus? How about egg and toast, yogurt and berries, a protein drink? So you can put in protein and mix it with some almond milk. I put in a little almond butter or some nuts and blend it up. And there you get a little bit of fat. So adding a little bit of fats. I have a client this morning who said she's having like a spoonful of peanut butter. That's like all she could do. And I said, well, this is temporary. You'll be back in the game soon. Oatmeal, when I'm making oatmeal, I put butter or ghee in my oatmeal. Or I add nuts to my oatmeal. I do both. I add flax. So adding some fat to food is going to balance out the nutrition and help with the make it more nutritious. So let's dive into fat, right? That was our big picture of where fat fits in. So fat is one of our 3 macronutrients along with carbs and protein. It's an important source of fuel and vital energy. And this is one of the reasons like a fat-free diet may not be health promoting for some people. Sometimes people will try different diets at different times just to evaluate, and that's fine. But in this talk, we want to really emphasize the importance of getting the appropriate amount of healthy fat in the diet. One big deal that fat does, one big job is balancing blood sugar, which is really important. Protein and fat prevent glucose insulin spikes, which is a big goal when we're managing cancer, because cancer cells use insulin to get more glucose in. And high glucose, high insulin is kind of giving like a green light to cancer cells. So we want to prevent that. So what keeps our blood sugar steady is protein and fat, and then modulating our carbs, having our carbs with some protein and fat. It supports weight management. So if not eating fat to lose fat, it's not really a plan. It hasn't worked. We know that we need small amounts of fat because it makes us full, and then we don't binge on carbs. And it also provides that satiety and that palatability. So like non-fat yogurt, which is pretty bizarre, they add things to it. They add carrageenan, they add artificial sweeteners because it doesn't taste or feel good in the palate. So we have to add chemicals to mimic what's naturally there. So whole milk yogurt or even 2% yogurt has enough fat that just kind of feels good. Small amounts is what we need. So it's needed for absorption of fat-soluble vitamins. And those are vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K. These guys kind of work together. This is why we know when we're supplemented with vitamin D, it's advised to also supplement with a little bit of A and K. They often come together. They use the same receptor site. So taking a lot of D can actually throw off balance of A and K. So it's new research coming out now that it's, if you're going to supplement, you want to supplement with all three of those. So it feeds the brain and nourishes the nervous system, right? It's part of the reason that people that are really fat phobic or have eating disorder issues and they can't eat any fat at all, they tend to have really kind of fried nervous systems. So we need to sort of coach them that gentle, small amounts of fat is actually needed for our body. Building block for hormones, as we mentioned. It lubricates the intestines. It kind of oils up the tubes, if you will. It supports bone health and prevents osteoporosis. So we actually need fat in order to absorb calcium for bones. And this is why non-fat milk or non-fat dairy isn't as bone supporting as having some fat in it. And it provides insulation, right? So what was all of the information and that guidance and recommendations about non-fat diet, takeaway diet? Really was quite an interesting political saga. There's a lot of food politics. It can get pretty weird. And fat was basically really maligned in starting in the late 60s and the 70s. And they recommended non-fat, take out real fats, butters, replace it with margarine, low-fat diet. And what they found is that it turned out to have the opposite effect, and that people were gaining weight, and also they had a higher incidence of heart disease because it caused people to eat more carbs. And actually, it was the carbs that were causing the problem. So butter isn't bad for you after all. Major studies came out years later, like decades later, and said, hey, we were told that fat-free diets were the hit. And actually, the data did not substantiate that. Meta-analysis, 500,000 people, those eating more saturated fats, did not have more heart disease. There's so much more to it than that. You can't oversimplify and demonize one macronutrient as being the causative effect of disease. And the sad part is I still hear this. I still have people coming in saying, my cardiologist said, don't eat eggs for breakfast. And I said, well, what did he say to eat? He says, he didn't. And I said, well, what are you eating? Cheerios. Well, what's worse for you in terms of heart disease? The Cheerios. Have the egg, right? So the emphasis on saturated fat as the main dietary villain really distracted attention from the real dietary risk factors such as sugars and carbohydrates. And there's a reference for you, so you know I'm not making this stuff up. Let's go back to what fat is, and let's put on our biochemistry hats. Fat is complicated. It's a macronutrient, and it's characterized by its degree of saturation. So you've heard of monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, and unsaturated, right? All these. So what do you mean by this saturation thing? So it really refers to the long carbon hydrogen chain. So the C's are carbon, the H's are hydrogen. And if they're all saturated, all the hydrogen bonds that can possibly fit in that molecule are there. That's called saturated. If there's some open bonds where they're not filled with hydrogen, what happens is oxygen can come in and it can get oxidized or damaged and go rancid. So there's unsaturated fats and there's saturated fats. And all fats are going to be a combination of saturated and unsaturated. Some are going to be more saturated than unsaturated, such as animal fats are going to have more saturated fats than, say, plant fats, right? We need saturated fats. They are not demonized. The problem is we can't have too much saturated fats. And what kind of saturated fats? For example, saturated fats from factory farmed animals is much more inflammatory and not as good as the saturated fat from a more grass-fed, a more organically grown animal. And this is where we've gotten into trouble. And we'll talk a little bit more later about the differences in meat. But I wanted you to understand the degree of saturation because it gets a little complicated, I think. So what is fat? Fat is a combination of three kinds of fatty acids. So we use the term fats and fatty acids interchangeably. Some foods are going to be higher in one kind of fatty acid than another. So for example, olive oil is very high in monounsaturated fatty acids, right? Chia seeds, flax seeds, higher in polyunsaturated, and then butter is got more short chain fatty acids. So there's monounsaturated, there's polyunsaturated, and then there's saturated. So when we talk about those bonds, though there's only one unsaturated bond in monounsaturated, polyunsaturated has a whole bunch of open bonds. So oxygen can come in, and this is very unstable, right? So what the food industry has figured out, we'll take these vegetable oils that are very polyunsaturated, and we'll just use a bunch of chemical processing, high pressure and nickel, and fill them up with hydrogen. And that's where we get hydrogenated oils, which we find out were not very good. Good for shelf life, not good for people health. So this is kind of basically monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, saturated. They're all good. We need them all. What we need is a balance, and what we need is quality. So let's to reiterate the types of fats. There's saturated fats, and these are the guys that are solid at room temperature: butter, ghee, animal fats, lard, tallow. These have been demonized, but they really are part of a traditional diet. Coconut oil. And then there's polyunsaturated fat that are very liquid, very heat sensitive. These are fish, nuts and seeds, vegetable oils, some seed oils. So remember, fish is going to be a combination of some saturated, some monounsaturated, and some polyunsaturated, right? And we'll talk more about how this comes into cooking. So on monounsaturated fats, which have been communicated as being very health promoting, is our olive oil, our avocado oil, and our sesame oil. And those are monounsaturated, and they have a lot of health promoting characteristics. But so does polyunsaturated and so does saturated. We need them all, right? So let's talk about how we can get them in the diet. And also monounsaturated fats, we can cook with olive oil, avocado oil. I'm not real big on cooking with sesame oil, but I cook with olive oil and avocado oil because they're not damaged as easily as the polyunsaturated. And we'll talk more about cooking with oils. So the saturated fat controversy, the effects of saturated fat on health, one of the most controversial topics. While some experts warn that having any amount of saturated fat is a problem, others argue that it's really part of a healthy diet. So it's really part of the food controversy, and you really want to just go with traditionally, what have we been doing? And then not stick with fads or stick with some of the weird food politics that came about. Let's stick with what is going to work for us. So small amounts of high quality saturated fat in the diet is health promoting for most people. Despite the American public following recommendations to decrease dietary saturated fat, we've seen a dramatic rise in the rates of diseases associated with obesity, cardiovascular disease. So this whole diet heart hypothesis, eat fat, clog up your heart vessels, get heart disease and die. That hypothesis has not stood up the test of time. And the reason why I think it's still promulgated, because it really feeds into the statin drug industry, which is another whole story. But heart disease is a lot more complicated than that. And it doesn't work like I eat an egg, it increases my blood cholesterol, clogs up my artery. That hypothesis just doesn't work, even though you sometimes keep hearing that. It does lead to an increased LDL cholesterol if you have too much of it, especially in some people. And this can be a risk factor for cardiovascular disease, but still it's not really assigned a causation. So there's a lot of controversy about it, and there's a feeling that saturated fat has been demonized. We need small amounts of saturated fat that's higher quality. So example, if you're going to have animal foods, you would want to have, say, grass-fed, 100% grass-fed is different type of saturated fat than a factory farmed. Or you can have coconuts and avocados for their saturated fats. So that's the thing to be aware of, is there's a lot of food politics going on about saturated fat. And the data is actually pretty murky and not really substantiating that saturated fat isn't the big demon. There are many other causes of heart disease and mortality, and especially unrefined carbs. So let's talk a little bit about trans fats. These are the artificially created fats when they take polyunsaturated fats and they're not stable. So we chemically alter them to make them stable and have a long shelf life. And we thought this was great. So don't have butter, have Crisco or have some margarine. And they thought this was great. Well, now we turned out that not so great. They're fake foods, they're fake fats, and they actually are not really health promoting. And so a lot of things are coming up with people who have a high amount of processed foods with trans fats, higher incidence of heart disease and higher incidence of LDL cholesterol, higher incidence of inflammation. So our essential fatty acids, there's two types of polyunsaturated fats. There's omega-6 fats, there's omega-3 fats. And what we want is a balance. And the problem is, if you're eating a lot of processed foods or commercial animal products, you're getting way more omega-6s than omega-3s. And so nuts and seeds, cold water fish, pastured beef, 100% grass-fed, pastured dairy, that's going to have more omega-3s and have a better balance of omega-6s. We typically want a ratio of about 3-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3. The standard American diet gives about a 20 or a 30-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3. This is where people start taking fish oil to try to restore that balance and try to give more anti-inflammatory. We think of omega-3 fats as reducing inflammation, and we think of omega-6 as being contributing to inflammation. However, you need a balance. You do need omega-6s in the diet, omega-3s. And so this is where a balanced diet of high quality foods can be very, very helpful for you. So what are the recommended sources of fats? Okay, I get it. Fat's good for me. I need to include fat in my diet. What kind of fats should I eat to give me all of the qualities that this macronutrient provides? I would say mostly plant fats, smaller amounts of animal fats that are higher quality. So plant fats, avocados, coconuts, it's coconut, the coconut flakes, the coconut meat, the coconut oil, the coconut milk, nuts, all kinds of nuts, walnuts, almonds, pecans, Brazil nuts, seeds, all kinds of seeds. And all these nuts and seeds are going to have different balances and ratios of saturated and omega-3, omega-6s. So they're all different types of balances. And this is why it's a good idea to do a diversity. If I gave you a recipe, maybe I did, a homemade trail mix. So you can make by bulk seeds and walnuts and almonds and sunflower seeds, maybe put some coconut in there, mix them all together, keep them in a jar in the refrigerator, and you've got a wonderful snack. A good portion would be, say, a quarter cup a day, because remember, fat has higher amounts of calories. So this is where we can get messed up. We can't eat too much. So a quarter cup of trail mix 1 to 2 times a day, maybe in our oatmeal and granola, and then later as a snack, or maybe in our salad. For people who are want to gain weight, perhaps more nuts. The other thing about nuts is if you soak your nuts and then strain your nuts, they will be more digestible because all the plant nutrient, the coverings that prevent the plant from germinating too soon will be removed. So for example, I have a sunflower seed. And that sunflower seed has the potential to grow into a 25-foot sunflower. I mean, how amazing is that as an example of nutrient density? But the sunflower seed, if I soak it, sprout it, or roast it, then I remove the coverings from it so that I can better digest and absorb the nutrients. For example, almonds. I soak them and strain them. I remove a lot of that outer layer. I'll absorb a lot more of the calcium. All right, so we soak and sprout, or sometimes we buy sprouted seeds. And you don't have to soak them and sprout them. You can just enjoy them. Let's see, olives. Olives are the bomb, right? And remember, these guys are nutrient dense. I'm not going to have a whole bunch of olives. I'll have like 6 olives as a snack or 6 olives in a salad. Olive oil is one of my favorites. It's one of the best ways to get in fat. If you say, oh, I've got a meal here, but I don't have any fat, a drizzle of olive oil. Not only is it providing healthy fat, it's also providing a lot of cancer-fighting power, especially if it's unfiltered. Unfiltered olive oil, unrefined olive oil is going to have more cancer-fighting polyphenols, more nutrition than, say, refined. And we'll talk more about refined. And dark leafy greens have a small amount of fat, right? Because that helps you absorb your fat-soluble vitamins. So having like a big plate of salad greens and a drizzle of olive oil and some other veggies, that fat's going to help you absorb all the carotenoids and vitamins. And then your animal fats, first you want cold water fish is wonderful, high in omega-3s, salmon, cod, herring, halibut, sardines, mackerel. I gave you a recipe for sardine salad. I hope that you try that. Sounds a little weird, but trust me, it's really good. I even call the recipe, they never know it's sardines. Like I gave it to my daughter and she still thinks it's tuna fish, right? Because it tastes so good. And if you're still a little queasy about sardines, mix half and half, tuna and sardines, right? Great way to get in healthy fat. I love to have sardines on an apple cracker, like I said, or I'll put it on a butter leaf lettuce. Make like a pretty hors d'oeuvre too. And then our pastured beef lamb chicken. What do we mean by pastured beef? It's grass-fed, grass-finished. It's not given soy or corn. This is where some of the saturated fat problems come in, is if an animal is fed foods that are not part of its traditional diet. So a cow does not eat GMO soy or corn. But if they're fed that, they fatten up, right? It's much more inflammatory. So grass-fed, 100% grass-fed, they're going to have more of a healthier amount of saturated fat. Yeah, so those are some examples of that. Avoid damaged or processed fats. So this is like French fries. Does that mean you can never, ever, ever have a French fry? No, of course not. Once in a while, you go out and you have a burger and fries. Okay, enjoy it. But we wouldn't want to do that every day. But deep frying in vegetable oil is a problem. You know, when deep frying first came about, like McDonald's back in the 60s, do you know what they fried their French fries in? Lard. And when I say lard, people go, ooh, lard. That's that food bias that we have been propagandized with, right? So traditionally, what we used was not processed vegetable oils. We used rendered animal fat from healthy animals. And so lard was from pork, from pigs, and tallow was from beef. There's duck fats. This is like rendered fat. And it's now coming back because it's a saturated fat, not a lot of open bonds. It can withstand high temperature, right? So this is what the problem is you're heating these vegetable oils to very high temperatures over and over again, and you're getting damaged fats all over the place. They refine the oils so it can withstand some of the heat, but it's still considered pretty toxic. Once in a while, okay. But if you're having French fries, well, if you want to have French fries, let's get some frozen French fries, or get a potato, slice it up, put it in some olive oil and spices, and put it in the oven. Make your own French fries that does not involve vegetable oils. This is where packaged foods will often have hydrogenated soybean oil, hydrogenated cottonseed oil. And if you read this label, it goes, that sounds pretty processed. And that's where those are kind of the damaged processed fats that we really want to avoid. So cooking with fats and oils. Now, this is usually a big question. It's like, what should I cook with, right? So 3 things to consider. It's complicated. It's very, if you look at any chart, cooking chart with fats and oils, you're going to see a lot of discrepancies. You're going to see a lot of confusing information. I've yet to see a chart. I'm working on making my own chart, but I'm going to try to simplify it. So the degree of saturation, the more saturated the fat, the better to cook with, right? It doesn't go bad. It doesn't break down with heat. So you're looking at your coconut oils, right? You're looking at lard, ghee, things like that. The degree of saturation, and also you can look at monounsaturated, so olive oil. So we'll talk about how olive oil, you can cook with olive oil. Just don't let it smoke. That's the big rule about cooking with any fat or oil. No smoking, right? Smoke point. The higher the smoke point can withstand higher temperature between smoking and breaking down. So if you've got a fat or an oil with a high smoke point, it could have a high degree of saturation. Or here's where it gets super tricky. You can have a vegetable oil and they've refined the heck out of it or hydrogenated it so that it can withstand a higher smoke point. And so that's typically not what we want. We want non-refined, and we want a pretty good smoke point, meaning it can go up, but we don't want to smoke it. So the degree of processing is the third. The less processed, the more nutritious. So let's explain this a little bit more. So high temperature saturated fats will work. They're very stable. They won't break down. All your animal fats and your plant fats, coconut oil, palm oil's got some environmental concerns. Medium temperature, moderately stable. This is our olive oil and our avocado oil. Sometimes they put sesame oil here, and I've kind of not cooking with sesame oil because I find them really processed. I'll use sesame oil as part of the finishing oil at the end. So here's the deal with cooking, and cooking, say, with olive oil. So what I cook with, mostly olive oil, but if it's going to cook a lot longer, I'll put coconut oil or a combination of coconut oil and olive oil. If I take my pan, I heat it up on the stove for about a minute, and then I add, say, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, unrefined olive oil, extra virgin, and then I let it heat for half a minute to a minute. It does not smoke. Then I add my food, vegetables, mushrooms. Maybe later I'll add some shrimp or small pieces of meat or chicken. Right? At no point does that smoke. In fact, when I add the food to hot oil, that actually raises the smoke point. Remember, a high smoke point can withstand higher heat without breaking down. So that's kind of how I do it. I heat up my pan, then I add the olive oil, heat it up a little bit, add my vegetables, add my food, and cook it, add my spices, and that works just fine. And again, if I want to cook, say I want to cook some nuts, I want to cook something a little longer, I'll add a little bit of coconut oil. And avocado oil works pretty well as well. Low temperature is less stable, do not heat, and these are like our nut oils and our seed oils, and these are typically finishing oils that you don't ever cook with. Way too high in polyunsaturated, way saturated, and also they have kind of low smoke points. And here's a link for you on healthy cooking. It's covered up by this McAfee thing. So you can check out that link. And I also gave you a chart. Be careful of vegetable oils. And this is one of the big problems with eating out, is the quality of the oils, because restaurants are not interested in your health. They're interested in making money. Of course, they want it to be delicious. So higher end restaurants are going to use more higher quality oils because they can get the taste. Lower quality or fast food restaurants, vegetable oils, and they come in these crinkly plastic materials, which is a sign that it's not good quality. And they're typically a mix of plant oils such as soybean, corn, cottonseed, sunflower, usually highly processed, very high in omega-6s, and they usually have trans fats in them as well. So this is where I think the problem has been. They were so bananas about getting saturated fat out of the diet that everything got replaced with vegetable oils. So they replaced butter with like margarine and all these bizarre types of chemical made margarine-y type things. And we were told that that was better for us. Not true. You're better off having something that was created, right? Like when they said, oh, I know that God made this one, but God only knows who made that one, right? So I like to go with traditionally, and Europe has done a better job at sticking with traditional foods. So for example, if you go to France and you say, oh, don't use cream. Cream's high saturated fat. That'll give you heart disease. You should use this, some margarine kind of stuff or some fakey creamer thing. And they look at you like you're crazy because they have stuck with their traditional foods. A vegetable oil is highly processed. It's not part of our food. And this is actually the problem. And like I said, McDonald's used to use lard to fry their French fries. And that was transferred to vegetable oils once the whole dogma set in about, saturated fat is bad, vegetable oil, highly processed vegetable oils are good. And so we're now starting to backtrack and go, maybe we need to look at this. So here's a chart, and I gave you a larger version of this. It's a guide to cooking with fats. I'm not 100% happy with it. Like I said, I haven't found a chart that I think is really worthwhile. I think I'll create my own chart. But it breaks it down as to what's recommended for high heat cooking and what's recommended for moderate cooking, and then what's not recommended for cooking. And what's not recommended for cooking is a combination of, it's either highly processed, because you could say, wow, there's a high smoke point, so why can't I cook with this? It's a high smoke point and high saturation point, but it's highly processed, and that's what the problem is. Because when we're cooking with oils, we also want to get the nutrition. When you process the heck out of the oil so that you can cook with it at higher temperatures, you've lost a lot of the nutrition, and you may actually have created some Franken fats. So it gets a little bit confusing. So basically what I do is I cook with coconut oil if I need high temperature, and I cook with olive oil. It's kind of like my staple, unrefined olive oil, and I use that mostly all the time. Sometimes I'll put a little ghee in it. I'll put a little bit of coconut oil, or the ghee will give a little bit of flavor. I don't like to cook with 100% ghee. Sometimes I'll cook with duck fat. Depends on what fats I have. So hopefully this chart won't be too confusing for you, and I've tried to simplify it. And the take-home point is, even though you've heard, say, sesame oil, oh, that's a pretty good oil to cook with, actually they're finding that it can be highly processed. It's pretty low in saturated fats, and the smoke point is high, but in order for that smoke point to be that high, it typically is pretty processed. So that's why I typically use sesame seed oil as kind of a finishing oil. Olive oil, avocado oil, I'll cook with those. Yeah. How much fat should we be taking in our diet? Well, because it's nutrient dense and calorie rich, 9 calories per gram, right? It's like 6 calories per gram for protein and carbs. So a little bit of fat goes a long way. So this is where you have to be careful. Now, a lot of people really crave fat. So they'll say if you put a plate of nuts or bowl of nuts, especially if they're salted, my goodness, salted and roasted, you just eat, 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 eat. Not a problem. It's better to have raw nuts. You can actually toast it yourself if you want, but you have to ration yourself. So a quarter cup at a time, not have a giant can of nuts. So you want a balanced amount of protein, fat, and carbs. So in general, 60% carbs, 20% protein, 20% fat. And there's a lot of wiggle room for that. Because fat has so many calories, you'll find it's very easy to have like a 30% fat, and that can work for a lot of people. Especially if you have blood sugar issues, you're pre-diabetic or insulin resistance, then having protein and fat in the diet and having less of the carbs, so this ratios might go down, less of the carbs could work for your individual needs. So the macronutrient distribution is going to vary quite a bit with the individual. The medical doctors typically recommend between 20 to 35% of their daily calories from fat, but focusing on quality, right? So old school medical doctors will still be stuck on 10% fat, non-fat diet, low-fat diet. And I'm like, for most people, that really doesn't work, right? But focusing on quality is really important. So at this point, I'm rambling on here. This is what's really hard about these Zoom classes. It's like, am I like losing these people? Are they like even, connecting? So time for a break, or time for a check-in, or time for looking at any questions we have at the chat. So, where are we, Colleen and Lynette? We still got everybody?
We still have our group here, but we only have one question so far. And what are the types of cold water fish is what it is.
Yeah, say it again.
What are the types of cold water fish?
Oh, yeah, good question. So I know people always say, what's cold water fish versus non-cold water fish? So the types of cold water fish are the types of fish that are growing right out here in Monterey Bay. So sardines are one of the best, cod, salmon, halibut, tuna. And so among those, with fish, we always have the concern about the larger the fish, the more mercury or the more PCBs or spooky stuff that's in the ocean. So the smaller the fish, the shorter time it had to concentrate those. And this is why sardines say is a better option than tuna fish. Or you wouldn't want to have tuna every day, having tuna once a week, but sardines would be good. So those are your cold water fish. Shellfish is cold water, as opposed to, well, shellfish can be non-cold water, as opposed to the fish that's coming from the Pacific, from Hawaii, or farmed tilapia, things like that. Yeah, so those are the typical cold water fish. Why is cold water fish better? Is because it's higher in omega-3s. So think about cold water fish as being more oily because it's cold and they need to insulate themselves. Where the warm water fish, the mahis and the cool fish that are in Hawaii and that, it's not as cold, they don't need as many oils to insulate themselves. So this is why cold water fish. So when they're collecting fish oil, they're collecting, they're going up to Alaska or places like that. Okay. So yeah, good question. Any other questions or concerns? Or does anybody need a tea break or a potty break, or should we power on?
If anybody does have a question, I think this would be a good time if you want to unmute yourself to ask it. Otherwise, we'll have Nancy keep going. Okay.
Okay, so maybe we'll
keep going.
All right, so let's just power through with fats. Yeah, okay. Let's see, what else we got going on here? So how do I get healthy fats in the diet? You've convinced me. I can't wait to get fat in my diet, which is really cool because fat tastes great. Fat's the bomb. And now I know that just eating fat's not going to make me fat. Sometimes eating carbs is going to make me fat. How do we get the right amount of fat into our diet? So how can we add fat into our diet? So say a traditional food like oatmeal, right? Not a lot of fat in oatmeal. We can add nuts and seeds. that's adding fat. We can add ground flaxseed, adding omega-3s. I add ghee or butter when I'm cooking my oatmeal because it makes it taste good. And a little bit is wonderful, right? I'll sometimes add almond butter to oatmeal or granola. If I'm trying to make something more calorie rich for somebody, or people say, hey, I have oatmeal, and then like an hour later, I'm hungry. Well, did you have enough fat in it, right? So I'll make steel cut, or I've been using sprouted oatmeal, getting online sprouted oatmeal. It's the bomb. Sprouted rolled oats, cook really fast, and I make a big batch of it. I add some ghee and some salt or olive oil, and then I'll add almond milk or coconut milk as it's cooking. And then I serve it with walnuts. I add hemp hearts. So hemp hearts are a score. 3 tablespoons is 10 grams of protein. Because oatmeal is not such a great way to get in protein. You may need more. So if I add nut seeds and I add hemp hearts, I'm getting a lot of protein. 3 tablespoons will give you 10 grams of protein. Maybe you only need 2 tablespoons, and berries and cinnamon. So adding, I've known people that'll do a drizzle of olive oil as well. As soon as they read the cancer fighting properties of olive oil, they went, oh my gosh, I have to get olive oil in. How much olive oil? Like 2 tablespoons of olive oil a day. Well, people say, you know what? I just put it in everything. I put like a tablespoon here or a teaspoon here. So by everything added up with salad dressings, I'm getting at least 2 tablespoons of unrefined olive oil. So what else? So I say, okay, I don't want sweet for breakfast. I need my savory, I need my eggs. Okay. I'll saute greens and mushrooms in olive oil with a whole bunch of spices, and then I'll plop an egg right on it, or I'll poach an egg on the side, right? So having my combination of eggs with greens and mushrooms and a whole bunch of turmeric and garlic, that's one of my favorite breakfasts. Maybe you want to have a piece of toast, right? Or maybe you want to have like toast and avocado, right? Make ahead egg muffins. I gave you a recipe for egg muffins with a piece of fruit, or often one of my to-goes. I'll take 1 or 2 egg muffins and a baggie of cut up veggies, red peppers, carrots, jicama, green beans, just a colorful baggie. And I'll eat my egg muffin with a baggie of veggies, especially if I'm on the go, or if I'm at home on a plate. So I gave you a recipe. It's basically like a frittata. You just put it in muffins. So you don't have to put it in muffin tins. You could just put it in a pan and cook it as well. So this is ways of getting healthy fat in, right? Large green salad, tomato, cucumber, pepper. Ooh, let's add sliced avocado. Great source of fat. Let's add some olives, or you don't have to do both. You decide. Some nuts or seeds. I like toasted sunflower seeds, or I like pecans that I toast myself. And then an olive oil vinegar dressing. And I gave you a handout, nut butter sauces, that has dressing recipes on it as well. Sardine salad and romaine lettuce leaves, or other small little butter lettuce leaves. Butternut ginger squash with some cream. So these are kind of ideas. Mixed nuts and seeds, which is a trail mix, like say a 1/4 cup would be a serving size. Cut up an apple. If you have a dollop of almond butter, it's going to kind of work for you really well to fill you up, give you a little bit of added fat. And it's like we're talking a little bit. Crunchy veggies with hummus, more satisfying and providing some good nutritive fat. Berries with a little bit of Greek yogurt. So if you're using a whole milk Greek yogurt, Nancy's probiotic yogurt has 40 billion organisms, wonderful probiotic food. Because it's so dense, I don't need very much of it. So probably like 1/2 cup will work with a bunch of berries. And I could put sunflower seeds or cinnamon maybe. Broccoli tahini sauce is one of my favorites. New Leaf Market makes a pre-made tahini sauce. But I gave you a recipe for tahini sauce, sesame seed paste blended with garlic and olive oil. Sometimes you can buy it already made. So sesame seeds, very high in calcium, so good bone support food. So broccoli with tahini sauce, grilled salmon, maybe wild rice, and then some sauerkraut. to help you digest it all. So you may want to get a smoothie. So protein powder or yogurt, almond or coconut milk, green veggies. I like to get a big bag of power greens, organic power greens, spinach, baby kale, collards, and I just put a handful of it in the blender. I put a handful of it, a couple handfuls of it in a pan, saute it up, plop an egg. That's my breakfast. Maybe a piece of toast if that works for you. If not, skip the toast. And you can also put nuts, nut butter, avocado, just a little bit. You don't need much. And ground flax or chia or hemp parts. You don't have to have all of these, but these are some ideas. Enjoy some fat with your veggies. Adding fat to cooked veggies such as olive oil. That's why ghee, butter or ghee, like on broccoli that's just coming, you just cooked, you put a little bit of butter on it. Oh, it's delish with some garlic. Or you put a little nut sauce. Improves taste and palatability, and it helps you absorb your fat soluble vitamins. So let's talk a little bit about eggs, because eggs have been pretty demonized. Don't eat eggs. They'll give you heart disease. It's like, show me the data for that. It was like old school scare, right? Eggs are one of the best foods around, unless you have an egg allergy, or unless you are one of those people with super high cholesterol, but that's rare, right? So a large egg is about 185 milligrams of cholesterol. So it is a myth that eating foods with cholesterol raises your blood cholesterol, clogs your arteries, and increases risk for heart disease. And then just take a statin drug and you'll be good. It's just an oversimplified model of health disease. Research consistently shows that cholesterol has very little impact on how much cholesterol is in your blood. In fact, if you don't eat enough cholesterol, your body will make cholesterol. As you get older, you make more cholesterol. So the cholesterol linked to heart disease is far more complex than just the intake of fat foods. It has a lot to do with the inflammation in the body, and it's kind of another discussion. So some people do have what's called a familial hypercholesterolemia. That's kind of a big word, meaning they have very high cholesterol, very high triglycerides. And then we have to be more careful about total fat intake. And some people with very, very slow metabolisms, we have to be very careful about total calorie intake. So there, of course, are individual considerations. But for the most part, eggs for most people are totally fine. However, not eggs are created equally. So that's another little blurb about the politics of eggs. So eggs are a nutrient-dense superfood, very high in bioavailable protein. That means protein you can use right away. This is why I'm saying a backup meal, scramble some eggs. And the yolk is the most nutritious part, even though you'll go to restaurants and they're still advertising the healthy breakfast as being egg whites. Wow, that's like so old school. Egg yolks are the most nutritious part. Contains choline for the brain, contains B vitamins, vitamins A, D, E, healthy omega-3, super high in iodine, calcium, zinc, antioxidants. They are the score, right? What are the best eggs to buy? So this is where it gets tricky, because if you're getting factory farmed chicken eggs from factory farmed chickens, they're not going to be as nutrient dense. And then they're just going to have a bunch of negative karma because the chickens are just raised in a pretty awful state. In an ideal world, we'd all have a couple of chickens out in the yard and protecting them from the coyotes, and we'd go out and collect our eggs and cook them and look at the yolk. It's so beautiful, vibrant, almost fluorescent. That's telling us that it's the chickens are out eating bugs and roly-polies and doing what chickens do, poke and dust themselves, as opposed to the factory farm chickens. So not everybody can have chickens, right? Maybe you do know some neighbors that have chickens, or you go to the farmer's market. You'll notice they're all different sizes and colors. So you can get pasture raised eggs, and those are the ones that there'll be more. So they'll be like $6.99 up to like $8.99 a dozen, as opposed to $3.99 for non-pasture raised. You can check out this link, Egg Scorecard, and that evaluates brands of eggs. So for example, if you go to Costco, they keep changing. You have to check this all the time. So the Kirkland brand At one point, it was really good when it was Anderson Kids, I think, and then it went down. I think now it's up again. So what they do is, this is an agency that rates egg producers in terms of humane conditions and also their feed. And then you can decide what's a good brand. Eatwild.com is another website to help guide you towards what are the good pastured eggs. So pastured eggs are going to be more nutrient dense. They'll cost more, but then you're eating less animal foods. How many eggs can you have? You could probably have like 3 to 5 eggs a week, or sometimes you'll have more eggs. Like I'll have a veggie frittata and maybe have it a couple of days in a row. Or I'll have egg muffins and have that like 3 to 4 times a week. And then the rest of the time I might have oatmeal or granola. So I wanted to talk a little bit about olive oil, because a lot of research came out about how olive oil can prevent cancer growth. So you can Google that, and I gave you some references. It's part of the Mediterranean diet. The Mediterranean diet, and one reason the Mediterranean diet is health promoting is that it relies on traditional foods. So a lot of the countries in the Mediterranean don't let food animal ranchers give their animals hormones, or they don't give them GMO feed. So they've stuck to their standards, if you will. The cheeses, for example, in Europe is a lot better off than, say, cheeses in this country in terms of the quality of the animals. But one of the key health promoting aspects of Mediterranean diet is the high use of olive oil, high quality olive oil, and choose unfiltered, unrefined. One of my favorite brands is Biryani's. It's local in California. You do need to check olive oils. There was a scam a while ago, you might have heard about it, where olive oil was being marketed as high quality olive oil, and it actually was diluted with other oils. So I'm kind of picky about what brands I use. I like it to say unfiltered, unrefined on the label. There are some unfiltered, unrefined sources, even at like Trader Joe's. And so what I'll often do is look up the particular source. So I'll look up Biryani, or I met up with Sebastian Biryani at the San Francisco Farmers Market and had a long conversation with him about olives and olive oil. And I was so impressed. And so, yeah, it's more expensive, but I consider olive oil as medicine. And it's delicious. It's just wonderful. So these are just some of the anti-cancer squalene, and unrefined is going to have more antioxidants in cancer fighting. And there's an article, a reference for you. A quickie salad dressing recipe would be a 1/4 cup of extra virgin olive oil, unrefined, 3 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, a tablespoon of white miso or other miso. That's going to add a nice umami flavor. It's also going to add more nutrition. A teaspoon of Dijon if you want. And if you want honey, I usually don't put honey. It depends. If it's bitter greens, I'll put honey. And then a black cumin seed oil is another kind of weirdo food that I've added in, because really high in cancer fighting thymoquinone. If you don't have it, that's fine. But if you'd like to add that in, organic black cumin seed oil that you get online, add a little bit of it, because it's got a little funky taste. So you don't want to screw up your salad dressing. I'm always kind of researching what are the top cancer fighting foods that maybe are lesser known. And so black cumin seeds, they use black cumin seeds in Indian cooking a lot. Punch, pour on, stir fry. So all these spices are really good. And I like to experiment with oils. Ground flax seeds. Flax are just underappreciated superfood. Rich source of fiber. Very good for bowel health and detox. High in soluble fiber. It binds excess estrogen. It's one of our best estrogen modulating foods, right? Provides prebiotics for probiotic bacteria. So the probiotic bacteria like to eat certain foods, and they like to eat plant foods, plant fibers. Ground flax seeds, one of their favorites. Ground flax is high in omega-3s, very anti-inflammatory. We know that cancer uses inflammation. Inflammation is a process that the immune system uses. highest source of cancer-fighting lignans. Plants foods have lignans, which are a cool group of plant compounds that can shut down numerous cancer processes. Supports safe estrogen metabolism. 2 tablespoons a day is about right. You don't want to go more than that. You don't really want to cook with it either. Or if you cook with it, keep the temperature low. So if you're going to make flax muffins, no more than like 325, because remember, they're highly unsaturated. We know that ground flaxseed can enhance tamoxifen. It's speculated that it might also inhibit the estrogen, the other AIs, aromatase inhibitors, but I haven't checked the data on that. Very good to reduce hot flashes, especially hot flashes associated with menopause or associated with taking estrogen blockers. So it doesn't mean you're going to do 2 tablespoons of flaxseed and boom, hot flashes are gone, right? It means you start adding it to your diet and you'll notice it has like a bowel regulation effect. But behind the scenes, it's having this very, very pronounced normalizing effect on estrogen metabolism, which is really important because estrogen positive cancers, we're taking a blocker drug for it, but we also need to make sure that we're adequately metabolizing and excreting it as well. Yeah, so adding flax, good source of fat. So here's some references, just so you know I'm not making this stuff up. Is red meat harmful? So I get this all the time. I'm tired of demonizing food. We demonize soy, we demonize dairy, we demonize red meat. What's the deal with this? Well, it's complex, and so the problem is that there's a distinction between grass-fed meat, organic meat, and factory farm meat. So small amounts of grass-fed meat, if you desire it, is actually very health promoting and can be good source of protein, good source of zinc, good source of carnitine, really good for blood building. In fact, I always recommend liver from pastured animals or organic animals if you have to build blood, if the bone marrow is taking a hit from chemo. So actually, I think red meat, I don't eat red meat when I'm eating out in a restaurant because a restaurant wants to make money. They're not going to get hormone-free, past 100% grass-fed. So if you see grass-fed in the store, you say, well, is it grass finished? And then sometimes the person behind the counter gets annoyed with you. Yeah, it's good, it's good. It's like, well, what's the difference? Well, it's marketing. So grass-fed, the animal could have been given a piece of grass on its way up to the slaughterhouse, right? Where grass-finished means it's never, ever had any non-grass food. So cows eat grass. And this is mostly for cows because lamb, sheep, and goats, they only eat grass. The reason why they give them soy and corn is to fatten them up, but it also makes them more inflammatory. The other reason is that the American palate prefers the taste that the marbling that comes from corn-fed. So corn-fed cows, they advertise it, the marbling adds a particular flavor. So when you're transitioning to grass finished, you may not like it and it may not taste so good. So these are all sort of considerations. So the guideline with red meat is always organic, no hormones. Now, lamb is not given hormones. Beef is. I'm not sure about bison. It used to be that bison wasn't, but somebody told me that you have to check it out. Grass finished, as I explained, less inflammatory, and then using gentler cooking methods. And then here's the biggie, limiting to small amounts. So 3 ounces 1 to 2 times a week for most people, if you like it. But if you don't, that's fine. But the majority of your diet is plant focused, where you're having smaller amounts of high quality animal foods. And the amount of saturated fat that you're getting there is fine, smaller amounts of it for most people. But I did want to spend some time on digesting fats because that can be a problem. We need digestive enzymes. We need hydrochloric acid from the stomach. And as we get older or we're stressed or we're taking acid blockers, we don't have that. We also need digestive enzymes from the pancreas. It's actually the hydrochloric acid from the stomach stimulates pancreatic output of digestive enzymes, such as lipase, right? And bile is from the gallbladder and the liver. Really important. And what we're finding out is as we get older, or we're stressed, we don't make as much hydrochloric acid, or we don't make as robust digestive enzymes, or we don't make enough bile. Bile is the first step in fat digestion. And if you don't have a gallbladder, that means you have to take smaller amounts of fat, because you're getting drips of bile from the liver, but you've missed out on the squirts of bile from the gallbladder. Right? So what do we do to stimulate digestion, which will stimulate digestive enzymes, hydrochloric acid, and bile? Ginger tea. That's what I'm making right now on the stove because it's cold up here. Apple cider vinegar before meals, a tablespoon in a cup of water. Just slightly stimulate digestion. Bitter foods such as dandelion leaves, radicchio. In Europe, they have bitter tinctures that they'll have before meals. Bitter stimulates digestive enzymes. Some people actually need digestive enzymes. Some people need enzymes with betaine HCl. And that'll say on it, digestive enzymes with betaine HCl. How do you know if you need those? Well, the food just sits there. It feels like you don't digest. So the first step, start simple. Do ginger tea, apple cider vinegar. See how you do with that. And then if you need a little more, you can experiment with taking like two caps or tabs of digestive enzymes just before a meal if you need to. For a lot of people, the ginger tea and apple cider vinegar works just fine. The other thing is relaxing before your meals. Because if you're a stress Nelly or you're eating on the go or in front of the sink, you're not actually in that parasympathetic zone mode where, I'm digesting now. We need a peaceful brain to digest our foods. This is where say a grace, do some deep breathing, or wait until you're not so stressed to eat. Always sit down, light a candle. Digestion will be better if you are relaxed state of mind. So bile, here's a little blurb about bile, is it's made by the liver. It's concentrated and stored in the gallbladder. That's the only job that the gallbladder has to do. It's secreted into the small intestine, and what its job is to buffer stomach acid. It's very, very alkaline. It helps digest fat. It absorbs fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin D, A. It eliminates fat-soluble toxins, eliminates excess cholesterol, and eliminates excess estrogen. Estrogen-positive cancer, I want to make sure I'm eliminating the excess estrogen that I don't need. So proper bile flow is critical. And we're finding that a lot of people just don't have proper bile flow, and this can actually lead to gallbladder disease. So healthy bile flow, how do we say, okay, I get it, bile's really good. What do I do to make my bile like really rock? Drink enough water. Bile is 95% water. The number one cause, there's two causes for gallbladder disease, well, multiple, two main ones. Dehydration, it's going to contribute to poor quality bile, gallstones, eating regular meals with protein and fat. Having fat stimulates contraction of the protein, of the gallbladder, it stimulates contraction of the gallbladder. So I'll find people with eating disorders, no fat in the diet, they don't get that stimulus. And then eat abundance of vegetables because the bile is alkaline. Overly acidic diet, overly acidic bile contributes to gallbladder stones and diseases. So bitter foods, beets are another really important food. And I'm looking at the time here because I know we're getting close. So maybe here are some references. Yeah. So that was kind of it, a little plug for bile, and then we're open it up for some questions.
Okay, fabulous. So we have had a few more come in during this time.
Okay.
I'll jump right to it. That was fabulous. Thank you, Nancy. So if you can share your thoughts on tofu blocks, soybeans, and your thoughts on taking fish oil supplements.
Yeah, so tofu as a food, tofu blocks, yeah. I mean, tofu soy is a really good food, especially if you have been used to it. Look for organic and look for GMO, GMO free, organic GMO free, which it is if it's organic. and it's a very good source of protein. It's not really a good source of fat, but it's a good source of protein. And you would include that with some fat, some oils. It's shown to be highly protective of breast cancer, and small to moderate amounts. So having tofu, 3 ounces of tofu, say 3 times a week, having a little bit of soy milk in your coffee, 7 times a week would be fine. Edamame, miso is soy. So I find if it's been part of your traditional diet, in a lot of Asian cultures, it's part of their diet. The studies are pretty positive, especially in women who've been having it since a young age. It's very protective. So then the question says, okay, so if I'm eating soy all the time, how come I got breast cancer, right? It's like, because life's not fair, and because cancer is really complex, and there isn't just 1 or 2 causes for it. The thing about soy, sometimes it can be hard. It's a cold food energetically. So we always want to have it with something warm like ginger or a ginger sauce. Make sure you can digest it. Some people just don't do good with soy. So it means you have soy, you just, I don't know, if your digestion's kind of weird, take a break from soy and see. Some people that have low thyroid or autoimmune thyroid don't do well. It's a goitrogenic food. It can bind iodine, but that's typically in non-cooked or large amounts. So cooked tofu or tempeh, miso, wonderful food if you like it. Yeah, good question. What
and
else?
then with that, this person asked about taking, what are your thoughts on fish oil supplements?
On what? Fish oil supplements. Yeah, good question. It's fish oil supplements, for most people, it seems like it's a good idea. The biggest concern with fish oil supplements is going to be on quality, right? So you have to do, this is where you cannot skimp. You can't go to Costco or Rite Aid, and you have to go with super high quality. So super high quality would be like Nordic Naturals, like Ultimate Omega. Of course, with any supplement, you do need to check with your medical doctor, right? So I don't know what's going on with you. Maybe you're on a blood thinner, or you're going to go into surgery, or you have your own particular condition and you are your own wonderful self. So you would ask your doctor, hey, is fish oil a good idea for me to supplement with? Other people who are eating so much fish in their diet, I say, I don't know why you even need the fish oil. And then the other thing that's come out about fish oil is, hey, we're taking a high amount of omega-3s. Remember how I said we need balance? And so if you're a person that hardly ever eats out, and you're not really getting a lot of omega-6s, you may be getting too many omega-3s, right? And so sometimes what I will recommend for that kind of a person, everybody's different. So a standard American diet person eating out a lot is like, wow, you need fish oil every day, right? Somebody who has a lot of inflammation, you need fish oil is one of our major anti-inflammatories. So you can ask your doctor to test HSCRP. Some cancers are largely inflammation driven, and fish oil can be really good. So one thing I've been having people do is consider doing balances. So instead of just strict fish oil, you may consider a blend like Complete Omega Essentials. I like it by Natura Health Products. And what they have found is this is omega-3s blended with some omega-9s, a little omega-6s, sea buckthorn oil. It's like all these bizarre, like, what are you talking about? Sea buckthorn oil. So these are like newer oils, because naturally when we're eating fats, we're getting a balance of omega-6s, omega-3s, omega-9s. So when we start supplementing, it's like, oh, are we throwing off that balance? If you are, like I said, standard American diet, we need more omega-3s. But if you're pretty much eating at home and not eating a lot of omega-6s, we may need a more balanced formula. So it's okay for most people to take a high quality fish oil. It's about 1,200 milligrams of EPA, DHA a day. It's great for a lot of people. It lowers inflammation, helps with hormone balance, can really help with hot flashes. But for some people, I say, hey, why don't you consider a blend like Complete Omega Essentials, and just do a little bit of blending of your oils, making sure you're getting all your different oils. Fats are kind of cool. We're trying to mimic what the traditional diet was. And when we get into supplements, sometimes we throw off balance, but taking like one soft gel, 1,200 milligrams a day is going to be fine for most people. And for most people, it's actually going to be very beneficial. Yeah, good question. What else?
I know we're at 2:30, but if everybody wants to hang on for a few more minutes, do you have another few minutes, Nancy?
I do. I'm happy to stay, but if anybody's got stuff going on, feel free to just say adios.
Yes, if that's the case, thank you for joining us. But okay, a few more. Can you talk a little bit more about grapeseed oil?
Oh yeah, I'm doing my own research on grapeseed oil, and if you look at that chart, the person who generated this chart, who's a colleague of mine, she didn't give it like big stars. She said that it was too high in polyunsaturated, and her biggest concern is most grapeseed oil is highly refined, and that it's really hard to find unrefined grapeseed oil. But if you can find grapeseed oil, it's actually, I think, okay to cook with, because it's low in saturated fat and it's high in polyunsaturated fat. And when you see the smoke point, like 420, it's hard to find that smoke point with that degree of saturation that's not refined. So that's kind of the problem. So I'm lukewarm about grapeseed oil. I personally don't cook with it. My husband likes to cook with it sometimes, but from the research that I've done, it's not really one of my favorite oils, but it is kind of in the back of my head because it keeps coming up with people. I always get sesame oil and grapeseed oil, and you'll see it advertised as, hey, it's pretty good to cook with because its smoke point is pretty high. But then I say, yeah, but it's polyunsaturated is pretty high. And so in order for the smoke point to be that high, most of the time it's going to be processed. So here's another way I look at it is, every time I'm going to be cooking with something or having something, I want to say, hey, what nutrient goodies is this going to give me? And then if you're managing cancer, you're going to say, okay, what cancer fighting goodies is this going to give me? I'm not going to get as much from grapeseed oil as I'm going to get from olive oil. From unrefined olive oil, I'm going to get so much. And maybe, in all fairness, this is because the olive oil has been studied up the kazoo and the grapeseed oil hasn't been studied up the kazoo. So it's on my list of, let's do a little bit more research about this grapeseed oil. But me personally, it's not one of my go-tos for cooking. Yeah, I hope that helps and doesn't make you more confused.
And then another one, how do we know we are not digesting our food?
Oh, yeah, really good question. When you're going through stuff, when you get older, you're not as good at digesting. It's the way it is. It's like a car, right? It doesn't work so good. Number two, when you get stressed, like you get a cancer diagnosis or something, right? Stress, you're not digesting your food as well. You're not digesting your food, you're not hungry. When you eat your food, you feel full for longer. It's like, oh, I just feel, it's almost like Thanksgiving syndrome. You eat mashed potatoes and you never eat mashed potatoes. It's like, I just don't feel so good. So signs of that the other reason is you're not digesting your food, perhaps constipation. Now, constipation can be a cause and also an effect, right? So just digestive is not really good. And then I said, well, what are we going to do about that? Well, I want to look at what you're eating and how you're eating. Are you overeating large amounts at smaller times during the day? I mean, some people do better maybe with portions. Maybe you feel like full, overfull because you ate too much, right? Again, it's like Thanksgiving syndrome. But what if you just ate, especially fat, and you didn't it feels like it's just sitting there. Another sign that you're not digesting fats is if your feces float, right? If you have a bowel movement and you just happen to check it out and you notice that it's floating instead of sort of diagonally slowly sinking. Floating stool is a sign that there's high fat in that stool, so you weren't digesting your fats, right? And this can be from low bile, or it can be from low lipase, or it could be from a lot of different things. And so it's a little bit, it might be different for different people, but that feeling like you're very full. And you might even have noticed it if like you're not feeling well, or you're stressed, or you're tired. I notice if you're really tired or you haven't slept well, it's almost like the body doesn't have the energy to digest. Digestion is a very high energy inducing process. You have to make hydrochloric acid, you have to make bile, you have to make enzymes. And when you're just tired and older and stressed, it's like, ugh. So then if you are not really good at making these digestive components and you have the food, sometimes it just feels like it sits there. And this might not be all the time. So those are signs that you're not digesting your food. The other thing is also in the stool, if you see food, if you see a lot of food, undigested food in the stool, that can be a sign of it. And there also, you can do a stool analysis. A good stool analysis will look for microbes, good and the bad and the ugly, and potentially pathogenic, but it also can look for digestive factors. You can see how well you're digesting protein, carbs, and fat. And this is for people having a lot of gastrointestinal issues. I'll say, hey, let's just do a comprehensive stool analysis to evaluate your digestive capacity. We also can look for estrogen detox. We can look for a lot of different things. But the telltale signs is the food just kind of sits there. You don't feel so good, and like I said, the bowels. And that's how it is for most people. You can try. The other thing you can do is just kind of try doing that apple cider vinegar thing, a tablespoon in a cup of water before your meals. Do it consistently. Say, hey, I notice I feel a little better. Or some people do better with digestive enzymes. They'll do digestive enzymes with betaine HCl, like 2 of them at the beginning of the meal. Some people have to go higher and they go, wow, this really made a difference for me. So there's quite a bit of individuality. Yeah, good question.
And then just 2 more quick ones, hopefully. Do you think there's any advantage to eating the whole food versus the oil?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think it depends. Like, what are you talking about? Like, if you're talking about flax seeds versus flax oil, definitely go flax seeds, because flax seeds, you're going to get not only the omega-3s that would be in the oils, but you'd be getting the lignans. The other thing is flax oil goes bad so quickly. So I'm not a fan of that. So when it comes to the oils, like have grapeseed extract, eating grape seeds, but you can't buy grapes with seeds in them anymore, right? So in terms of foods, that's all I can think of is flax. So I think my opinion, the whole foods are going to be better, but it's application. So in other words, if I'm having some really signs of inflammation, joint pain, and I'm also getting dryness like skin, I'm eating fish. But if I do that booster of also taking fish oil, I notice, wow, my joint pain's a little bit better. And hey, I've noticed my skin's not so dry. So it's individual. You may need both, right? Yeah, good question.
And what type of oil is best? Final question. What type of oil is best for pan frying food on a cast iron pan?
Wait a minute, I didn't get that.
What type of oil is best for pan frying food on a cast iron pan?
On a cast iron pan, you still could go with olive oil. Yeah, cast iron pans. No, I'm glad you brought that cast iron pan up though, because you have to, what do you call it? Process it. How do you get your, when you get your cast iron pan and you put oil, I put olive oil on it and then heat it on the stove for a little bit just to get it prepped. And then you never ever cook, you never ever wash it with soap. I cook with cast iron pan the same as I cook on other pans. So I use olive oil, or sometimes I use a blend of olive oil ghee or olive oil coconut oil, depending on what I'm cooking. Yeah, good question. And you can bake it. The cool thing with the cast iron pan is you can, like making a veggie frittata, you put some oil. I like olive oil. That's kind of what I do. And then I put my onions and garlic, spices, and then I put my chopped veggies, saute it. Then I'll beat my eggs, plop them in there, cook them on the stove a little bit, plop them in the oven to get that nice little taste. Sometimes I'll put sliced tomatoes, take it out. I love the evenness of that cast iron pan. I loved how I could saute it and I could plop it into the oven. It's just, you have to make sure you don't screw it up by, like, if people are over at the house and they're washing the dishes for me, they start to put soap on my cast iron pan. It's like, no, you have to make sure you take care of your cast iron pan. I love them. So good. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that is it for our questions. And thank you so much for taking this time and sharing your knowledge.
You are so welcome. It was so wonderful being with everybody. And I hope I didn't confuse you more. It was like, oh, I'm going to talk about fats. It's such a confusing situation.
Can I just ask a quick question? It's Barbara on my iPad. Might have missed it. With coconut, I've been experimenting with cooking with coconut oil as much as I would with olive or butter, but I'm finding that it's problematic. So can you just, so I don't have to keep on experimenting. Does it have a low burn rate? I mean, it's probably not good for stir fry. Is it where it's, I guess, what's the difference with it versus, I know about butter, I know about grapeseed oil, I know about olive oil, but I have been experimenting with, I had the coconut oil. So can you tell me something about the coconut oil when you use it as you would butter or olive?
Yeah. Well, coconut oil is a saturated fat, so it can withstand very high temperatures, has a very high smoke point. So it meets our criteria of not very saturated, of being highly saturated and having a high smoke point. Most people use coconut oil to cook with, depending on the flavor. Like when I started cooking with coconut oil, my kids complained, everything tastes like coconut. And some coconut oil tastes more coconutty than others. So I think it's a matter of personal flavor. And one other application of coconut oil is using it with another oil, like olive oil, just to give it a little bit more stability. And it also dilutes the flavor. As far as cooking with ghee, I find that the ghee butter like burns. Ghee won't burn as much as ghee. Ghee will not burn as much as butter would, so you don't want to cook with butter. but
when I did the coconut oil, I'm remembering now, it did burn. It steamed. It. I have the pans that you have to heat up first before you can add anything to them, and then let them cool down before you clean them. And it burned really. I guess it was just too hot when I added it.
I think it was too hot. I think you left the heat on too long. So that's actually true for any oil. It's a good idea to put the pan on the stove and heat it up like medium heat for half a minute to a minute max, and then add your 2 tablespoons of olive oil, or add your tablespoon or 2 tablespoons of coconut oil, or a blend. And then a minute, not even a minute, like half a minute to a minute, add your food. So I think it was left on there too long.
Yeah, that makes sense.
No matter what the fat is, no matter what the oil is, don't let it smoke. Smoking is telling us that you have damaged the fat, the oil. And damaged fats and oil are not what we want. That's something your liver has to kind of mop up. It's a stress. It's a free radical. So never smoke.
Oh my gosh.
So really just stand there, because I've noticed, like, sometimes my daughter will be cooking and she'll put the pan on high, and then she puts olive oil on, and she just walks around. She's in the refrigerator, and I come in and go, wow, what's going on here? It's smoking. And it's like, never smoke. So this is something like you're committed, and the coconut oil should be fine for you. Most people, it's a matter of the flavor.
Okay. And coconut oil is just as good or bad for you as any other saturated fat. I mean, it's.
Yeah. In fact, we could talk more about coconut oil and some of they all have different medicinal benefits. So coconut oil is very, very antifungal. Olive oil probably has more proven cancer fighting power, right? This is why I'm kind of like all over olive oil. Olive oil has been studied a bit more. So that's why it's really a matter of preference.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Thank you so much, Nancy, and thank you everybody for joining us today.
Sure. You guys have a wonderful day and enjoy the rain when it comes to your neighborhood.